Hey everybody, this is Andrew from Cards of the Rocks. And today we're going to be talking about the absolutely spectacular and chaotic Australian Grand Prix. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. I don't even know where to begin with this race. It started off absolutely chaotic during the day. You had F2 not being able to run. They had to cancel the entire race after going around 3 different times with the safety car. It was just way too flooded. Now, they had time to let the track clear from the water for the F1 race, and they were able to start it pretty much on time. Even with that, there was still some dangerous conditions. We had the formation lap. It looked like everything was hunky-dory, all ready to go. We were able to start the race. And Isack Sadjar bins it, spins out the car, smacks into the wall on the formation lap. I mean, you're starting off with those cold inter tires. It's a very wet track. He's obviously new to an F1 car. I felt really, really bad for Isack when he slammed into the wall. You know, they showed the shots of him crying through his helmet. He didn't want to take it off even. I thought the scene of him and Lewis Hamilton's dad actually getting together and him consoling him was really, really nice and really sweet. That was not a good way to start off the race, and definitely not the greatest way to start off Isack's career in F1. I can already see people talking about how Helmut's probably calling Lindblad's agent. They're saying, get on over here. We're getting this guy out of the car. I don't think there's any way that Hadjar doesn't bounce back. I mean, he's a very quality driver. He was able to almost win a championship in F2. I think he has the ability to bounce back for sure. And we know that Visa Cash App Racing Bull this year definitely has some speed. Maybe it's just in Albert Park, who knows? But he was able to show some speed, especially as well as Yuki. They had something behind that car, and I think he will bounce back in the next race. Now, if we thought that was a chaotic way to start the day on the formation lap, we just had to wait until lap 1 for anything more chaotic. Lando was actually able to hold off Max starting going into turn 1, which as personally a McLaren fan, I was super nervous, getting flashbacks to Max in Brazil in the rain, just absolutely flying. But this time Lando was able to hold off. But back a little bit further, we saw Jack doing spin as he tries to put the power down going into turn 5, slamming it straight into the barriers, almost having that Alpine taking the complete rear wing off. And you just hear all the Australian fans let out a giant groan at the same time right after they see it on the screen. And you got to feel for Jack in his first race, especially in Australia. That's really tough. Excuse me, not his first race, his second race, because he did race in Abu Dhabi. And that brings out the safety car to start off the day on lap 1. And you think we're just going to be clearing the track. We'll get back to racing. And then all of a sudden it pans over and Sainz is in the wall out of nowhere. I mean, it was essentially the same thing as Hadjar and Doohan, just at different speeds at different parts of the track. They tried to put the power down and the car just loses it. It's not able to get traction. You heard Sainz over the radio say something. He got like a surge of torque or something of the sort while he was trying to go into that turn and just absolutely bends it, loses the front right wheel, and is out of the race. So we have 3 people out of the race within the first lap. Sainz could have been bagging really, really important points for Williams. We know that Williams looked really, really fast, especially around 1 lap. And before that, we couldn't even tell if it was going to be able to sustain that through the entire race, which Alex Albon later showed all of us that the Williams does have some serious power behind it. Before this race, all of us were looking for a wet to dry race because that brings absolute chaos. And as F1 fans, we're foaming at the mouth for chaos, and we want overtakes and we want something a little bit different rather than someone just bursting out 20 seconds in front of the field and running away with it. We got our wet to dry race. Australia delivered. Everyone throughout the race, after the first couple laps, they were trying to manage their inters. You could see Max and Lando swerving off the racing line just to try and get some cool temperatures into the tires because they were overheating because they didn't want to pit yet. It was too early. They didn't know when the next cell of rain was coming. They wanted to make sure they had those inters used and they didn't waste them. You could see that some people were still struggling. We saw Max Verstappen was even human for a second, which I'd never seen a moment like this before. He loses it going into the turn and Oscar is able to actually overtake him. Max locks up the left front tire, goes far into the turn, and it's a McLaren 1-2. Now, right after Oscar passes Max, this is where things become very, very interesting and a little bit awkward and weird, especially as a McLaren fan. Oscar had some serious pace. He was able to catch up to the back of Lando, both on inter tires. And as soon as Oscar gets within half a second of Lando, McLaren decide to pull a big brain move and they tell Oscar, keep the place. What happened to Papaya Rules? I thought the Papaya Rules were there to say, y'all can race each other. Just give each other a little space. Don't crash. Do not lose points. But you have to let them race. And for them to come on the radio and tell Oscar that, especially on his home race, especially in a time where he is the fastest car, I did not think that was fair. Now, right after this happens, we see Oscar, he almost loses the entire car, almost crashes, almost loses the race. And he dips back almost 3 seconds behind Lando, loses a bunch of valuable time. Was he angry? Was he distracted? I'm not sure. We will never know. I don't think he will ever tell us. But I think that did impact his ability to focus on his drive and focus on that lap. 3 laps later, Oscar is about 3 seconds behind. He lost all that time to Norris. And then right after that, McLaren comes on the radio and says, okay, free to race now. It does not make any sense. I'm a big Lando fan. I love McLaren. But honestly, at this point, what are you doing? I thought they were pulling Ferrari moves. I did not think that McLaren would stoop to that level. We know that they had bad decisions last year, especially when dealing with 2 number 1 drivers, quote unquote. But this, to me, was the worst way to start off the season. That got me really, really nervous for the rest of this race. How do you do that to Oscar? He grew up like literally 17 feet from Albert Park, where you're sitting doing his strategy, and you do that to him. I mean, that to me was awful. Now, right after this crucial moment in the race, we see another important moment, and we see Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin absolutely bin it coming out of turn 6, slamming into the wall after dipping his left wheels into the gravel, bringing out yet another... Sorry, what? That wasn't Lance? Saying that was Fernando? I mean, what am I supposed to do? I saw an Aston Martin in the wall. How am I supposed to assume that's Fernando? I'm sorry. Sorry, everyone. I saw an Aston in the wall, and I just assumed... Never mind. Anyways, after the safety car, everyone's able to jump back into the pits. They put on slicks. Oscar and Max are able to catch up to the back of Lando, and everything's essentially neutralized at this point. On lap 44, about 7 laps later, the skies open up. All hell breaks loose, and the entire city of Melbourne just explodes into ruins. You hear everybody on the radio saying class 3, class 2 amount of rain, and it came down heavy. On the way into turn 14, you see Lando and Oscar both lose the car. Oh my God, Lando's off. Oh, Oscar's off. They're both off. Oh my God. Oh, Oscar's beached. Oh God. Oh no. Oscar almost beaches the car, but somehow he's able to save it. He reverses his way all the way out of the grass. I still have no idea how, to this moment, he was able to get out of the grass like that. Anybody else would have been beached. I think he was able to pull off some magic getting out of there and able to save his race. You see Lando fly into the pits, having post-war like flashbacks to Sochi in 2021. He is not gambling anymore. He was on the radio early saying, if the rain's coming, we need to get ahead of it. And that they did. They used the strategy well. Max stayed out, though, as if Red Bull was never even in Russia for that race. And then they pitted a lap later. I mean, I think they screwed up his strategy there, but maybe Red Bull was pulling some big brain move, because his teammate Liam Lawson played the ultimate team game, saving Max's race. He decided, all right, time to slam into the wall. His team must have gotten in his ear and said, mate, I mean, your race is done, dude. Just bin it in the wall, let Max catch up behind the safety car, and we can maximize the amount of points, because you're not getting any today. So just sacrifice yourself and let Max take some points. Even with Red Bull having a perfect strategy and Liam being the greatest teammate of all time, Max wasn't able to catch up to Lando in the end, and Lando ended up winning one of the best races I've seen and has a very strong start to his championship campaign in 2025. The top 10 ended up being Lando P1, Max P2, George P3, Kimi Antonelli P4, Alex Albon P5, Stroll P6, Hulkenberg P7, Charles Leclerc P8, Oscar Piastri P9, and Lewis Hamilton P10 rounding it out. If you had told me that in the first race, a Williams, an Aston, and a Sauber would have beaten out both Ferraris, I would have asked you to give me some of what you were smoking, because it must have been incredible. Now, George and Nico, it seemed like they had the quietest race they possibly could have. Nico, P7, in a Sauber. They already outscored their entire 2024 season. They outscored them already. Remarkable. Great start for Sauber, and that's one of the best days they could have asked for. George Russell in P3, it seemed like he did next to nothing that entire race and just sat back, cruised past all the absolute chaos, and crossed the line P3 and realized, all right, well, I made it on P3. He must have gotten the word on the ear and said, that's a surprising result. Now, the fact that Kimi Antonelli was able to achieve P4 is astounding, especially after he almost bins it on lap 14 going into turn 4, spinning it just like Hadjar, just like Doohan and Sainz. He doesn't hit the wall though, so luckily he's able to rejoin the race and he gets to P4. What an absolutely incredible race from him. Almost got screwed over by an unsafe release penalty that they ended up rescinding after the race. He absolutely deserved that P4. I mean, Mercedes, even on points with McLaren right now, I would not have expected that. That would not have been my 2025 bingo card at all. Great for Mercedes. Great start to the year. Also, the fact that Stroll was the Aston that beat out both Ferraris, I never would have expected that. It seemed like Aston was actually having a really good race in general, and then Alonso decided to bin it and get to know the barriers way too much. And Stroll was able to keep cruising along forward, but maybe Aston's a lot stronger than we actually expected. I mean, they did have a good qualifying session and were looking pretty good during the race. Alex Albon as well, coming into P5 into Williams. We know Carlos Sainz was out. That cost them a lot of points, but Albon getting 12 solid points for Williams. What a day for him. He should be really, really proud. Almost had P4 with Antonelli's penalty, but, actually deserved the P5. What can I say about that? Absolutely fantastic for Williams. They really deserved it. Now, we have to talk about Ferrari as well. I mean, the fact that they tried to stay out during the rain and cost Hamilton and Leclerc their positioning. Lewis did lead the race at some point, which on paper looked incredible, but you knew they were going to have to come in and pit. I mean, that rain was coming down heavy. You could see from the first turn that it was downpouring. There was no way Leclerc and Hamilton were going to be able to make it. If they did, Ferrari would have absolutely been lauded as the best strategical team for the entire year, and that would have been put up in the rafters, put it on a banner, get some pictures of it. They would have been extremely happy, but ended up screwing them up and costing them a top 5 finish, I think. Speaking of Ferraris falling down the order, we have to talk about Oscar Piastri's overtake of Lewis Hamilton going into turns 11 and 12. I mean, what an unbelievable move. What this kid's already pulling off so early in his career in Formula One is just astounding. Being able to go around the outside of Lewis, meeting up with him, and then taking over the apex into turn 12 was nothing short of amazing. He's already showing that he has the heart of a champion and he's willing to risk everything to go for it and get that place. Senna said that if you don't go for the gap that's there, you're not a racing driver anymore. And Oscar is taking that as literally as he can, going for every single gap that he can find. And it was just a great move on his part, making up for the fact that he had almost binned it and lost himself the entire race already. He came back, salvaged 9th place, and was able to get McLaren some reasonable points in order to stay atop after race 1. Lando off to a great start. I just think we can't get much better than that. That is my review of the Australian Grand Prix. You let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Give me a like, subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. That'd be fantastic. I appreciate you coming by and listening to my opinions. This was one of the best races I've seen in the 5-6 years I've been watching Formula One. Couldn't have asked for more to start the season. This 2025 season is going to be incredible. Thank you all for stopping by the channel. I hope you all have a great one. Cheers, be good to yourself, and take care. Goodbye.